Welcome to my channel, entirely dedicated to touring with a Brompton bike. And in this video I would like to talk a little about maintenance. I will not show you how to fix the bike. There are plenty of videos on YouTube that you'll be able to find that go into quite some details on how you fix the different parts on the bike. What I rather want to do here is just to share some experience and give you some tips that might help you to complete your tour on a Brompton. I will cover four main topics. I will talk of the type of failures that are likely to happen on a tour, the 3 steps I follow in order to limit them, spare parts I carry on a tour, and what is in my toolbox. I think of maintenance as a way to, number 1, prevent critical failures, and number 2, limit and if possible repair non-critical ones. Let's first see what type of failures we might encounter. They can be divided into 2 main groups. We have critical failures, and these are the kind of thing that will stop you from touring, that may make it very hard for you to continue. On the other hand, we have non-critical failure, and these are most of things and repairs that can be done while you're on the road, and very often you will be able to do them. At other times you might need help from other people or from a bike shop. But anyway, these are kind of things that will not completely prevent you from cycling on and continuing, for example, to the next town and in order to get some help. Let me introduce you to Brompton. This is my trusted bike that I bought in 2013, and it's been an exceptional bike. I was able to cycle on 4 continents with it, probably well over 15,000 kilometers by now, and I never had any issues where I've started a tour and I was kind of stuck with maintenance issues. So what I want to do now is just looking at the bike to kind of highlight what are those parts, the critical failure and non-critical failure that you might experience on the tour. So if we start with these most severe critical failures, and as I said before, these are the things that prevent you from continuing your ride. The first thing we can see is obviously the frame. I haven't heard particularly about Brompton frames cracking or failing, but this is something to be aware because any bike can experience that sometime. On a Brompton folding bike, of course, we have to bear in mind that there is a folding system, so in some ways the frame, it's stressed even further. Another critical failure that could happen is the handlebar cracked. And this is an aluminum part on the Brompton, and on the N-type, like mine, you can see it looks kind of fragile. It's much more resistance actually than it looks like. But what I would say is that it's very important to keep a good eye on it. And I have heard once a report of someone who was touring with a Brompton bike and he had one of these handlebar crack. I wasn't able to ask and find out exactly how that happened, and in some way I do feel that there's part of negligence from the person that was using it, and this could have been either in overlooking the maintenance part of it, but I think even more the way that the bike is handled. With a Brompton handlebar, bear in mind you're not riding a mountain bike or a dedicated touring bike. The handlebar will not take extreme abuse that would happen, for example, if you're going uphill. You're standing on your pedals and just rocking the handlebar to go up the hill. This is not something that I recommend doing on a Brompton. Other critical failures that could happen, of course, involve the wheels. If you have a cracked rim, for example, or a wheel which is severely buckled and a lot of spokes, for example, snapped, that as well is something that would stop you from riding the bike. Similarly, we have in the transmission part, so the crankset, if a paddle, again, this is an aluminum part, so if the pedal was to crack, again, you'd be probably stuck. And similarly, the bottom bracket, of course, is also something that will prevent you from continuing. There are other things on a Brompton which are actually critical, although they don't look like. Sometimes they're very, very small parts that are very easy to carry. And what comes to mind immediately are the clamps. So again, they're made of aluminum. and there's two of them. One is just holding the handlebar stem closed, and one of course is holding the frame locked here. If you are going on a tour and you don't have a spare one, and one of those were to snap, this would be a critical failure, in the same way that you wouldn't be able to continue with a frame. You wouldn't be able to continue for something that simple. Another important part on the specific to the Brompton, which you should not overlook, is the front clamp. I think if you have seen any of my videos in the channel, there are several videos where I explain exactly how I carry the luggage, and a lot of luggage is at the back in my rucksack, but I find the tea bag at the front sitting on this clamp particularly useful. It's a very, very large bag, and the capacity is great, and it's just a great bag to carry when you're touring. If you have one of these failing on the tour, you might argue that it's not critical, in the sense that I might be able to put all the things that I carry in the tea bag somewhere else, or strap the tea bag at the back, and so on. But I think it would have quite an impact, on my ride. So that's just another thing that I want to highlight for the moment. And another video that I've recently uploaded talks about the rack. So this is also something which can sometimes give you some problems. Usually this is not critical, but if you haven't seen the video, I'll put the link up here. Have a look at it, because I feel it is something quite important to bear in mind if you're touring with a bike. So having talked of the critical parts that can fail, the non-critical ones are the ones that you will most likely encounter during the tour. And these are just the usual repairs that we do on all kind of bikes. So you might have a puncture, you will have to repair that. On the Brompton, you might have to change tires more often than you do on regular bikes. Because of the small wheels, they do wear out quicker. So this is a repair that you might have to do. You might have some time to adjust the gears. You might have a spoke failing, snapping, and that's something that you might have also to fix if you can. So these are just the regular and basic kind of repairs that you should be able to do anyway before your tour. How do we minimize the failures that we've just discussed? I think it is a good idea to follow 3 steps. Step number 1 is routine replacement. Step number 2 is bike service, and step number 3 is repairs. Very often when we think about maintenance, we only focus on repairs. But as we have seen, most of the critical issues that could stop your tour, if you think about it, they can only be prevented by the first 2 steps that I mentioned. Also, there is a good chance that you won't be able to replace Brompton proprietary parts while you're away. So do not wait until those parts are damaged while you're traveling. Follow Brompton, for example, recommendations and replace parts when they need changing. And remember, it might sound like you will be wasting money, spending money on things which are currently working. But remember that if you replace a part, very often you're able to take the old part as a spare with you. So that will give you extra peace of mind while you're traveling. In the information below, I will put a link to a digital copy, a PDF copy of the Brompton Manual. And in there you will be able to see that they do recommend certain mileage for certain parts to be replaced. So for example, aluminum components, things we talked about, like the handlebar, the clamps, the crankset. For these parts, they say that they can work up to 8,000 kilometers. Of course, these kind of ranges vary according to the use, but in order to give you an idea, I think it's really, really useful to know how far a part has gone and when you should replace it. For components like brakes and gear cables, they can last up to 5,000 kilometers. If you're talking of transmission, so we always know that the chain, for example, if it's never changed, it will eventually stretch. And what happens if you don't change it is that the rear sprocket will get worn out on the bike. So you will end up having to change the front as well, and the back too, because the chain would have worn them out. So another recommendation that Brompton makes is that the chain is changed within 4,000 kilometers. Obviously, other things that are worth looking as far as wear and tear. We have the tires, that's the obvious thing. Brake pads, the chain tensioner. It is a plastic part, so if it gets a hit, it's quite vulnerable. And the front block, as I talked before, which is quite a key part on the Brompton when you're traveling with luggage. The second step that I always take before a tour is, as mentioned, take the bike for a bike service. And when we talked of those serious failures that can happen to the bike, it is very likely that if anybody is able to spot them, it will be a Brompton retailer, someone that is used to repair the bikes. And part of the service will involve checking the rear hinge of the bike, for example, which is a part which can be vulnerable in changing, the folding of the bike, transmission, the brakes and gears, and so on. So I think it's really a key point to never skip. Again, you will spend a little bit of money, but it will give you a peace of mind, and you'll be able to set off in your journey with much more confidence. If you follow the first two steps, chances are that the only thing you will have to deal with is just minor fixes that you can learn to do yourself. And remember one thing, you do not need to know everything. If you're a bike mechanic that works on Brompton, that's great. We'll be able to do much more than I can do, or most people can do. But remember, what is key here is to grow your confidence. So learn new skills, learn to repair new things, but also remember that it's very important to carry some spare parts whenever you can. If you have spare parts for the bike, and as we've talked about, Brompton sometimes use proprietary parts, if you have the parts available with you, you might not be able to fix it yourself. But if you do take the part to a bike shop, even if it's not a Brompton retailer, and you just tell them, listen, I have the gear cable and my gear cable just snapped, do you think you'll be able to fix it? I have no doubt that they will be able, to use their skills on normal bikes, on a Brompton bike. So do not only think of the things you can do to fix a bike, but also remember that provided you bring the part, a lot of other things will be fixed by others and people that can help you. For this reason, let me just show you some of the spare parts that I bring. So this, for example, is the front clamp, and I put the new one on the bike. So this is the old one that I had, which was still functioning. So in case that breaks, I have a spare with me. I usually bring more than one, but this is just a clamp, one of the clamps that sits here. Always extremely useful and very important that you take it with you. Here you can see I bring a couple of brake pads. If I need to change because they're worn, or if there's I've gone through some gravel or mud and I feel that they're damaging the rim of the wheel, it's probably a good idea to change them on the road. So I always take these with me. These are just some nuts and bolts which I carry. They're kind of small. I'm not sure if I will ever use them, but I suppose it's easy to take with me. Other things I carry, I have a chain tensioner. As I mentioned earlier, it is really strong, and I never had any trouble with it. But still, it's kind of made of a rigid plastic, and it's got some spring system inside. So it is possible that one of these will fail. So I like to have just a spare with me. It's extremely light, and it won't take much space in your luggage. Gear and brake cables is always good to carry with you. You can use normal cables that are used on regular bikes on the Brompton by adjusting the length. But one thing that sometimes is different is there's a kind of cap which just sits at the top of the gear, for example. And this is just a specific Brompton part. So if you use just normal cables from other bikes, sometimes in the bike shop they would have to kind of to use some tools to shape this top here, otherwise it wouldn't fit. Again, something really light and easy to carry, so why not just bring a couple of Brompton specific cables with you. A tire, I mentioned, extremely important. Normally, depending on how long you'll be going for your tour, but I find that a tire can last me up to maybe 2,000 kilometers, and then I start seeing some wear on the thread. I use, by the way, Schwalbe Marathon tires. This is the original. I have used the Plus as well, and they've always served me very well. They're very good tires. I'm not sure if you're able to see, but what this is just a few links. I have this length of links from an old chain that I had, and I have some master links as well. I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but the chain, for example, it's something which, if it breaks, it is a critical failure. You will not be able to cycle on. You will have to push the bike. So I think if what I would recommend is when your time comes to swap your chain for a new one, ask your bike shop to give you back the old one, and just simply practice. That's the way I've learned. Practice on an old chain and see how you can replace the links and disassemble, break a chain and put it together again. And you will find that with a little practice is nothing really too difficult to do. And if you just bring a few spares like I do here, even if that was to happen, I would probably be able to reach the next place where I can have possibly a new chain put on the bike. Next, this is the bar that I use under the saddle. That's where the luggage, the rucksack is held. But what I use it for, it's, as you can see, I've got spokes in here. So I've got a series of spokes and nipples, both for the front and the rear wheels. They have slightly different length, so bear that in mind. You cannot use the rear spokes on the front wheel. So I'll try to have, I always carry 3 or 4 from the back and a few for the front wheel in case I should need them. I must say I never had a spoke failing, and I'm not really confident in truing the wheel. It is kind of an art doing it. It's not something easy that you can quickly learn. But this falls into one of the things that I said before. If I have the part, if I go to a bike shop and I tell them, spoke is snapped, that the wheel is a bit of a mess, can you fix it? What they would probably tell you is that, yes I could, but I don't have proper spokes for your bike. So that's when you say, oh well, I carry them, I've got 2 or 3, here you go, and they'll be able to fix the wheel for you. So that's something to bear in mind. And I think this is just this is not a part at all, but I just have it in here, so I'll show you zip ties, plastic ones of different sizes and length. That's something very useful to carry when you're touring. They can be used for all kind of situations. Key to traveling with a Brompton bike is to always remember the bike you're riding. That they're very strong bikes, they're very reliable. I can certainly say this, from my experience. But you should ride them a little more gently than you normally would ride, for example, a mountain bike or a sturdier bike. So this is something that if you pay attention to this, you're more unlikely to run into issues with the bike when you're touring. As far as tools I'm carrying while I'm touring with the Brompton, as you can see, you do not need too many things in order to carry out basic maintenance while on the road. You will definitely need a 15mm spanner, and this one is something that you use, for example, for the rear wheel removal. Next we have a 10mm spanner, And this has got a lot of uses, but one of the most frequent use I find is when adjusting the brakes, for example. And when you do so, you actually need two of these, because one will hold the nut at the back, and the front one you can use to adjust at the front. So always carry two of these. I think it is quite important. Another thing, I mean, I have it in this key, but I think it's quite useful to have a screwdriver. You wouldn't use it many times, but for example, if you ever needed to remove the cassette from the rear wheel to fix a spoke, there is a kind of ring which held it in place, and a screwdriver is something quite helpful to help you remove that. Something I like to carry is also one of these spanners, which are adjustable by spinning this wheel. So you're able to adjust the width, and should I ever be in the position where I have to fix something, and for some reason I find that my spanner keys are not the right size, I can always use this one. So I think it's quite a useful thing to carry. Always carry one of these multi-keys. I think they're quite useful. These are just different sizes of Allen keys. With the Brompton you mostly need two sizes, so you need a 2.5mm, which is what you would use, for example, to replace a brake pad. And then you need a 5mm Allen key, which is used to adjust the saddle and the pentaclip. Other things I have in here, of course, everything that you need to fix a puncture. So the levers, of course, I would carry patches and the glue, and I also always carry a couple of spare inner tubes, which make it easier sometimes. Rather than repair it on the road, I just replace it and then fix the tube later in the evening, for example. Let's see for the front. And then here what I have is the chain removal tool. As I said, if a chain snaps, you're not able to continue with the bike. So I think it's quite a good skill to learn, breaking and fixing the chain. So this is the tool you use. And of course, in order for this to be useful, you need to have some extra link of the chain. So this is what I would use, to fix the chain. And finally, the last thing that I carry in here, it's a key that you use to adjust the spokes on the wheel. When you're tuning the wheel, you would use this key. Again, it is not something that I'm really able to do. I've never actually even had to do it. But should I be in a position where a wheel is really badly buckled, at least I can give it a try having the key. And remember, like we said before, sometime, even if you're not able to do something, you might find someone where you are that is able to give you a hand. They might not have the right tool for it. So again, very, very good. If you carry this one, you'll be able to give it to them and they might be able to help. I hope you have found some of these tips useful. If you have, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and get inspired to travel with your own Brompton. Thank you and bye for now.